Hello and welcome again to the fifth module in the Mastering Tech Standardisation with ETSI Basics course. Let's have a look at a real standard and see what they look like. We're going to use a couple of examples from ETSI. You can download these. The links are below. You can just search for the titles on the website or you can look for the numbers, but you should be able to find them really easily. We're going to look at one for connected cars and one for cybersecurity. After we search for the document, you'll get a list of standards that you can download. For non-members, you can just download the PDF. That's that little red box. Members who can log into the website can also download the Word version. I would always recommend starting with the PDF version. It loads faster, especially for big specifications. Connected car parking services. Did you know that there was a standard for car parking spaces? Probably not. So, if you think about those self-driving cars that can park themselves, how do they know what parking spaces are available? It doesn't have to be a self-driving car. In fact, it can be any car park. First of all, when we look at the standard, we can see there is a scope. Scope tells us, in essence, what the standard is all about and what we're trying to standardize. Then we have some references. Again, here are those magic words, normative and informative. Normative are the ones you should really go off and read because they're the ones that are part of the specification. It is assumed that you are also meeting these specifications. We also have a long list of abbreviations. Surprise, surprise, it's standards. We've got hundreds of acronyms. On the ETSI website, there's a full list of all of these. The database is called TEDI. Informative information. We can see from this section that this is the background material. It's just a little bit of background about the standard itself. It can help you in understanding, and it explains about valet parking, about the fact that parking may have an energy supply, may have petrol, hydrogen, electric. These are all part of the specification later on. We have a lot of diagrams. Diagrams are really useful for understanding the specification. Some of them are nice informative diagrams, like the one here showing us the information flow, how each of the blocks gets the information. We have flow diagrams to explain on how the information flows around and how the system works. We often have lots of tables. Tables are really useful when you're looking at the data that flows between different elements. It's a good way of documenting it. Sometimes on the tables you'll see the words mandatory, conditional and optional. These are needed when you're implementing the standard. If it's mandatory, you must implement that field. If it's conditional, it depends on whether you're implementing something that meets that condition. And then optional, you can just decide for yourself. Again, we use magic words like shall. If we look at the maximum latency time, it has a shall next to it, which means it's a normative part of the specification. We often see the word can as well, and this is to do with optional requirements. Here we can see that there is a container, a general parking place container. This is describing what information is being passed between the elements. In this case, we have a geographical position and the name of the parking place. They're mandatory. Then we can add optional information on top, things like opening periods. We can see annexes in the specification. The annexes can be informative or normative. In this particular case, we'll start looking at what we call ASN.1. This is a computer readable format of the information that flows between the various elements. It's almost like a computer language. you can convert it to C by using open source tools. It's really useful. One other thing that ETSI do is to make the code available to download from the ETSI Forge. ETSI Forge is where the open source software and the ASN.1 are all stored. You can go in there and have a look at it. Here, I've just pulled out one section that describes the parameters that are sent when you do a parking reservation. We have some descriptive text. It's a bit like C in the way that we have comments that are explaining the parameters. In this case, they're all integers. We can see a whole set of parameters. If you're disabled and pregnant, you may select one of these, and the information is sent across. Let's take a look at a cybersecurity specification. The first thing you'll see, in fact on all ETSI specifications, we have a specification number and a version. The versions are a good way of tracking where we are with the document. Right at the end, we can also see that we have a date. That's the date that the ETSI specification was published. But to find the latest version, just look for the highest number in these releases. The major release is the first digit, and then we have a minor release as the next digit, and small corrections as the final digit. Every time we increment these, the specification has things added, removed, or changed. Informative references. These are really useful background reading. This is often where some of the information in the specifications comes from. If we take a look here, there is one on security. It's explaining that you should go off and have a look at these references. All of the ETSI specifications are designed with security built in right from day one. Testing and certification. ETSI itself does not provide certification testing. Certification is provided by external test houses. They read the specifications and then decide how they're going to be tested in order to ensure compliance. Sometimes ETSI do write test specifications, but the certification is always done externally. Defining requirements. Some requirements are easier to define than others. So here's an example from our IoT cybersecurity. You'll have noticed that perhaps 10 years ago, 5 years even, you might have bought a piece of connected hardware, so a router or a connected baby monitor. And you'll find that it has a password set to admin and a username set to admin. This is really bad security. So if anyone gets into your network, they can just Google the device and find out what the default username and passwords are, and then they're in. What we say here is that you should always have a randomized unique password. That's quite easy to write as a requirement. The requirement is quite simple. You shouldn't have the same password in every single device that you sell. Everyone should be unique. Others can be a little bit harder. If we look at one of these here, you'll see that updates shall be simple for the user to apply. So how do you define simple? This is where things get a little bit harder and some interpretation is required. And then finally, we'll often see this bit at the end, where it says section void. That used to be a requirement, but over time it's disappeared. So why have we still left a section in there? Well, it's so we can reference section numbers externally, and we know that they will never be changed. So let's take this example. If we deleted section 5.3.4, then section 5.3.5 would have become 5.3.4. And it would have been a different requirement to the original 5.3.4. So we just make them void. In summary, the best way to learn about standards is to read a few. They're surprisingly interesting. So everything from connected cars, cybersecurity, quantum key distribution. You'll find that most of the subjects that you're interested in will have a standard associated with them, and it's a really good starting point for reading around the topic. So why don't you just find a topic that you love and find the standard? If it's behind a paywall, go and check with the university library because they may have access to these documents. You can also check with the standards development organisations who may even provide you with free access.